please enjoy. Over to you, Paul.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. All right. So yeah, we're doing how to analyze data using the 5 whys and husbands. In this series, we always look to address a certain people group, and so today is the data citizens. So hope you enjoy it. And just to say that when we talk about how to analyze data, we mean both sort of traditional data warehousing and business intelligence, but it also includes big data and data science areas. So we'll cover that. Right. So data manager, I don't know if you were on, Howard, but I was just mentioning when we got into the call, last week is so quick. So we've done some talks, but some of the architecture stuff with the data products are slipping into here. So I don't know when it's going to happen what, but obviously today we talk about the data citizens. So these are what's all going to happen soon. How are you going to just take us through these couple of slides?
Yeah. So yeah, nothing much has changed on the first set of slides. So this was the essential concepts, and Veronica did finish her mind map last week whilst we were busy doing it, and handed it over to Andrew and Debbie to make it look a whole lot nicer. But we're still not ready with that. But I'm hoping that it will be ready certainly by next week. So those are the concepts. We've been through that. Spent a lot of time last week. So if we go, it's the big data essential concepts. Let's keep on going. Definitions we did last week as well. This is straight from the DMBOK. Just to say that both of them, and it's really interesting. I don't know about you, Paul, but I really found it interesting when we mix these two areas together and try to break the separation. And it's all about decision support, looking for insights, building data products. And Max and I were actually talking during the week. And it's interesting, Max, there's been some review of the data architecture section, and you'll be happy to know that data products are creeping into the data architecture section as well. So the latest version that's going to be coming out, there's some interesting discussions on data products within the data architecture section. So look forward to that. Veronica's in the process of vetting it and making sure everything's nice and tidy. But this is really, both of them are appropriate. And just for today, what I would like to say is we see data products as much wider than just the data warehouse that the BI team built. That data warehouse may certainly be a data product for internal people, but it doesn't address the data products for possibility of generating revenue, and then also some of the data products that the data scientists and the data citizens put together. And we were chatting earlier on today, and I had to remind Paul that our data citizens are those that use data within the business. And due to the fact that a lot of the data analytics and the data science has become business-led, we're finding more and more data citizens involved in the development of data products, both for internal consumption and the possibility of generating revenue. All right, any comments from your side on that, Paul?
No, I thought that was, when we went through the slides, it just sprang out to me that that the data citizens are really becoming more advanced.
Yeah.
It's not as if they are completely unaware of what's happening in the data space. They've got a lot more insights, maybe not know exactly how things are developed, but they certainly have a good idea of what the output should be, and not just normal data output, like in a product form. And so the content today is also, I think, it covers things that people typically in the analyst or even developer space will be doing, but it doesn't mean that those people don't have to wear a data citizen hat. And from the other side, the data citizens have a close relationship with the more technical people in the story. So it's just good to know that.
Okay, all right. If we move on. Okay, let's go on. That was all about the insights. We went through that in detail. All right, so it's always good for us to compare and understand what the different personas are, who's responsible for the work and the activities as described by the DMBOK. So we had the data manager last week, and now we're talking about the data citizen. And Paul, if you just go one back, no. Okay, so you'll see there number 6 is maintain data products. The definition in the current BI and data warehousing is a data mart or a data warehouse. So we are extending that a little bit broader. They may be developed within self-service analytical tools, or they may be developed with R and Python and things like that. So it's not just a data mart or a data warehouse that's a data product. And we do see that relating to the business value chain as well. Now, I know Max is really keen to redefine the term data product. So we will get that done hopefully before we finished. Okay, Paul, if we go on. So there's the data citizen. And you'll see in the big data, you'll see a lot more where the data citizen is getting involved with choosing the data source. I don't know about you guys, but I'm working with some econometricians in the central bank, and these guys are grabbing data from all over the place. They request the banks to submit data to them. The bank can be in just about any format, from web pages to Excel to PowerPoint to even in some cases PDFs. And the guys are pulling the data out of these elements and ingesting them, and then having to explore the data. Okay, so we can see the data citizen getting involved with all of those areas. I'm certainly not saying that the data engineer doesn't do this, but we're seeing data citizens driving a lot of this as well. Okay. All right, so here we have some of the metrics. I feel the metrics are a little bit weak with respect to data products and their contribution to the value proposition or the value chain in the business. It's missing in this section, but we will hopefully this will improve when more focus is placed on the data product itself. All right.
I think it was mentioned previously that the data citizens are choosing their own sources. Something I found in a lot of experiences are the data, like let's say the BI team, the definition is almost part of their job is to clean the data.
Yeah.
What I've been thinking is before them, whoever stores the data or wherever it's originally logged, if they just clean it up there a bit, then you don't have a lot of people having to clean data every time. So
yeah, Jacques, you're 100% correct. It's always nice that people clean up at the source, but we'll actually show you some of the challenges that data scientists are faced. And I've got some examples as well. So we'll take you through the challenges that the guys face in terms of getting what we refer to as a messy data set. And you can start seeing the picture over here in terms of helping the data scientists when they scrape it off that website and get it into a tidy or a ready format as we describe. But you are right. If it could change at the source, then we'd love to. But especially when we're getting data from websites or government sites, you sort of that's what you live with. And I suppose one can always then automate that and cleaning it up. But the data scientist would help in terms of getting some interpretation sorted out or adding some of the metadata to the data set. Does that answer your?
Yeah. What I also want to mention there is, I guess if one person can clean the data, because I see many times what happens is they do the same exercise over and over again. So clean the same. So that would save a lot of time, just in my opinion.
You're right. You're 100% correct. And I'd like to basically show you when we get into a proof of value, I'd like to show you sometimes what we're suggesting. So if we could keep those comments to that proof of value, that let's bring it up there and we can talk through that.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. So Esti's got a question, Paul, before you start going. Would something like costs for somehow percentage associated with data processing on-prem and cloud be a potential metric? And when you say data processing, Esti, are you referring to almost the cleaning and getting it into a state that we can use it? Is that what you mean by data processing?
Yeah, so any type of processing from getting it from the source to getting it to
Yeah.
the warehouse. So it might need to go
Yeah.
through the cloud 5 times in and out, and we might not be charged for data that goes in, but we
Yeah.
might be charged for data that goes out. So
Right.
that additional processing costs something. So
Yeah, I like what you're saying, and when we talk about a proof of value in terms of how do we demonstrate value, it is about reducing the friction and the cost of getting the data ready to present and analyze. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Okay, Paul.
All right. So Esti and I were working on a presentation. So Esti, we're giving you credit here for your pictures. I presume because you've done it, this is a female panda, right?
I didn't look at it like that. Let's go for it is a panda that goes by any pronoun.
All right. How do you write that in LinkedIn?
Yeah.
They.
Oh, they. Okay. All right. Okay. Go.
Right. So just linking on to the key message for today is the whole idea about data products and the citizens' involvement in producing them. And in our story here, this is a version of the classic story brand we also used last time. But let's say there was a panda, and the panda wanted to build data products. But inevitably, the panda faces issues, right? So externally, the data that the panda gets would be perhaps unusable or certainly messy. And they would get it from an internet friend or maybe an enemy who scrambled it up. And the internal need is to get some insights from this data and to use it in whatever the data product is supposed to be. And we'll recap on some of what the data products are in a minute. And then philosophically also, we want to make sure that data is used correctly, ethically, and that interpretation of the data or the visualizations or whatnot that's going to be produced, that those things are done in an ethical way. So that's the problem that the panda faces.
So maybe I could ask JG a question. He's our favorite test case. We see JG as an excellent test case. JG, is this problem? Can you relate to this?
Considering that there are they pandas on the call, so being one of they pandas, I can relate to the bleak expression. Yeah, so absolutely, the data product is difficult to articulate, as well as its contributing pieces are sometimes difficult to gather, and they are in varying levels of disarray, and that's not something to be. That's just real life. And so I'm loving the storyline with the pandas. So thanks, Paul. Thanks, Esti. Thanks, Paul.
We just have to replace that. The panda realizes that is a recipe they can follow, which is nice.
Yeah, that's true. I need to change the pronouns on the page as well.
I'm going to stick with she. Just I'm not going to do it. All right. Anyway, but so the panda realizes there's a recipe that she could follow in this case, and in other words, there's hope. And the recipe we're talking about is what we call the data trust transformation. It contains 6 steps, and we'll be going through some of that today. There's quite a few things that the 6 steps depends on, some of which we've discussed in previous talks, especially the unified star schema, so we'll get to that. And we can certainly also just recommend some reading and some literature on the topic. But so the call to action is join us in walking the path of this data transformation today. Try to follow along and test the process. And avoid getting trapped with unusable data and the inability to provide the analysis or commentary or insights that you would require to produce from it.
And maybe just to say there, Paul, I know the three of us are working with a customer at the moment, and they've sort of got the data to a certain point, but now they're tripping over. They're battling to get the right grain, they're battling to get the right levels of integration, and so this data starts off, it comes in messy, and without getting it in the right structure, this data product is almost dead in the water. JG, I wonder if I mean it's that bad. Is that an honest reflection of it?
Yeah, just maybe defending the client here. It's not a case that it's bad. It's a case that it's their client's maturity in their client's ability to provision the data is low. And so you either go away and wait for the data wait for the client's data maturity to increase, or actually what happens is you've got to do the roll up the sleeves and get involved. So these use cases of us having to ingest data that might be at multiple grains and chunky and messy, I think is such a real part of getting into a client's ecosystem to help them improve. So very real, but it's not like it's anybody's fault. It's just they haven't looked at it yet.
I suppose what I interpreted sometimes is that they had got a long way. They had done some fantastic work in Power BI, but getting all the right levels of filtering and different frameworks, there's still that integration that they in terms of taking it to the next level.
Yeah, you're quite right. So sorry, Sahada. So there's challenges on the input as well as there's now maturity challenges in terms of how do I model this particular problem.
Yeah.
And what I've found is the client actually keeps all of these models on the same spreadsheet, and then they start to trip over each other because they literally have a spreadsheet that they're keeping all their mappings in, and then they lose the ability to bring in the kind of the flexibility that a star schema gives them. And so that's a wonderful place to find a client because you can make such a difference so quickly.
Alrighty.
All right, just a quick recap on what data products, what the categories are and how we deal with them. We went through this in a previous webinar, and so I think just chat to Debbie if you want the link for that. But there's basically 5. We're not going to go in detail, but there's basically 5 of them. It's raw data product. In other words, it's just a set of data. Maybe it's an Excel file or a database table or something like that. Or it could be derived, which means that there's been some value added to that data in some way, perhaps additional metadata added, etc. It could be an algorithm and the data product itself. So a good example is something like Google Translate. It could be something that directly supports decisions, like, for example, visualizations or dashboards or things like that. Or it could be, and in this previous example, you still leave the decision-making itself with the human being looking at the data, interpreting it, and then making a decision. And the last category is just completely automated decision-making, like, for example, an automated self-driving car, or Netflix's What to Watch Next feature. All right, and then we just said that there are 3 ways to interact with typical data products. One is through a technical means, an API, where you call services directly and you embed it into your own solutions. Or it could be dashboards and visualizations. Or something completely non-technical, a widget or something that sits in perhaps in a web page, or an interface that makes use of voice or robotics or something like that. So that's just a quick recap on what data products typically are and how we relate to them. But I think, Howard, you might just correct me here, but I think mostly we are talking in today's talk about raw and derived, mostly, right?
No, look, I suppose what we're trying to do is show the data citizen how to get it into the right format that they can apply algorithms and or decision support. So that's sort of, I think you may be right in terms of just saying, but it's also there for decision support. So that's sometimes the challenge with this flow, because it could go to decision support without algorithms.
Yes, yeah, that's quite right.
But a wide data set is required in some cases for algorithms. So depending on what the algorithm requires, you've got to get the data into the right form for the algorithm or the decision support, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. and the message to tidy is basically trying to produce a data set that, I guess, that sort of lands here because it could be used in one of these ways.
Look, it can be wide, so that's what I was trying to say. So wide or USS could be used in decision support or algorithms.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's just jump onto this. How would you want to talk through this one?
Yeah, so this is basically what the data citizen can be faced with, and the type of things that they need to learn. One is that there could be an existing data warehouse within the organization with the data marts. They could then be using a self-service tool that would access that, and in that they could be at the same time accessing data sets within the data lake, and also then creating the wide data sets over there that are used for the advanced analytics. And then we have the advanced visualizations, and that's where we speak about a data visualization specialist that will help us. And you can see those interesting visualizations are far more complicated than a bar chart and a line graph. And so when we interact with massive data sets or lots of data points, then we have to find different ways of presenting it. But the core today is getting the transformations right for whatever type of analysis that we need to perform. Okay, so there's the top part. The BI team and the data engineer have probably built that curated data set. There may be a data lake that we land data in that could be in these different areas. And the other area aspect that we're seeing is that from a data mart, from a USS, we may want to go to the wide data set so that we can apply advanced analytics. All right. Okay, so
I have a question on that,
Sure.
those advanced analytics. Would you then keep both data sets?
yes,
So you would mark
Yes.
the one as like wide and the other one so that
Yeah,
people know
so-
which one to use?
yeah. So what I've done, ST, is I've actually created a technique of going from your data marts and then having what we call a sort of wide data set generator that flattens the appropriate facts or observations with the right set of dimensional attributes. Okay, and we can see the challenge that we face sometimes is if we try to present a star schema type structure to an R package or to something like that, it's really hard for them to make sense out of all of those different keys and numeric numbers and stuff like that. So I'm certainly trying to suggest to BI people and people that create the data products that a wide data set at the end of the day, at the end of these, on top of the USS, is a valuable data product that can be used.
Okay, cool. So almost using it as a separate data product. It's like
Yes.
still in further enhancements of that. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
because I mean, just the USS is almost unusable, and they would have to almost flatten themselves by grabbing all the related dimensions and then flattening it out into a data set and getting that wrangling either right or wrong, and then they finally have a data set that they can do cross observations across the different variables that they're dealing with.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, so proof of value, this is something that I've been putting and starting lately. And one of my customers that I was working with, they said they're sick and tired of proof of concepts and they want to go proof of value. And I don't, it's it has a similar type of idea that we're doing, but what the important outcome of this is that you're there to demonstrate a valuable output. It's not just about, oh, let's look at a concept, and whatever that concept may mean, then hope that it shows some value. Okay, so this proof of value is, there's quite a bit of work that people are doing, and the evaluation, the end result of this is, why should I engage with your data product, and why should I trust you? Okay, so let's start rethinking about this. Whenever we build these data products, whenever we put these iterations together, what is the proof of value? And then if we go one step down, I use the canvas as helping me to say, what is my value proposition? What is the value proposition that I'm suggesting? And as part of this data trust transformation recipe that we put together, I created this value proposition. And the value proposition goes something like this. Paul, if we can then just move forward. If we were to look at our data lifecycle, we all know that that's part of the DMBOK. That's where we go. The generic data lifecycle, if we go one step further, and then we look at where does the business get value, all this planning, development, control, there's no immediate value that the business can see out of all of that. And that's typically where our data engineers get involved. So I've put this together, and this is where I'm suggesting when I work with econometricians that we can do some data architect and data modeling work, but the data citizen needs to explain some of that data to us. They need to be involved in defining the data requirements so that we can get the right design and enablement. And my recommendation is here that if we can get, and what we need to do is we need to get people through the messy, tidy, all this USS stuff to this bottom area, which is the use and enhance, where the data citizen and the BI developer can start interacting either by self-service or building some visualizations to answer questions. But we've got to get them there, because all this other journey around the edge here, this is costly and it's not giving direct value. And it's this cost that we have to remove and we have to take off, or not remove. It's never going to go away. And as Jacques was talking about, if we're cleaning and we're getting it right at this level, yes, there is value to the data citizen, but it's measured in a different way. It's not measured in what business decisions it can support. It's more measured in the case of, what, if I don't trust the data, then it's not even going to be used. So we're trying to just separate, let's get this process going as quickly as possible. Let's get the people to these last two phases across the journey. Okay. So this was, I've actually broken it down in terms of the different data management, and we can see the data quality expectations and issues like that. So Jacques, this was sort of the area that I wanted to share with you, how we put a data management whole policy subsystem together, how we talk about data quality, where do we clean the data. And what I'm trying to say is this masses of work done up front and the work done at the end, when we talk about disposal and privacy, we have to get rid of that. I keep on saying get rid of it, but take it out of the lives of the people that need to get to the data and start answering the questions. Okay, so this is where we get the proof of value. This is where we start showing the value to the business. Okay, Paul?
Just a concept that I encountered. It's not a complete concept, but in terms of value, for instance, let's say a moving company, you're moving all your furniture to a new home.
Yeah.
So you can do it either by yourself, or you can ask a company to pay it.
Sure.
Or pay a company to do it. So there's a certain amount of effort and costs involved in doing it yourself. And then it's quite expensive to get someone else to do it. Now, with a company with this, the value is pretty straightforward. What do you value as a person to have someone else do it for you rather than doing it yourself? So with bigger companies, it's difficult to kind of quantify that value. But with, let's say, a moving company, it's a bit easier to quantify that value. And I think with, let's say this, there's various ways the data products can, let's say, add value. For instance, creating sales opportunities through decisions, or creating additional products, or saving costs, things like that. So there is kind of a thing there.
Okay, so just to go back a step, Jacques, just to clarify. Okay, so Jacques, I'm fully in agreement that this whole getting this work done properly, that is a cost reduction. And I get that. So it's going to be, there is value for me to get the data in the clean format, in the right format. I get it. But there's no direct value to the value proposition to the customer. Right? So if I'm providing a service and I'm selling data for decision support, basically they expect the data to be of the right level of quality. And yes, there's some value to the customer that they don't have to worry about the data quality, but that's more at the cost equation. So I'm trying to separate the cost aspect of it, and we certainly see that. I'm certainly not arguing that we don't need data management. Please, I'm not trying to say that. I'm fully in agreement that we have to, the right data management has to be in place to get it into the right form. But when we talk on relating the data product to the business value chain, that's the area that we're trying to focus on with the data citizen.
So something I think is a bit, well, unrelated to this, it's, I think when you, let's say, generating reports through a BI system,
yeah.
it is sometimes very tricky for the business to value how much that is worth. Because let's say you've got salespeople getting that information, how much motivation does it give them? How much does them assist them to know where they are? And then you also want to get that data to them quickly. Like there's if you get it like a month later, yes.
Now, already what we're saying is this is why I included the BI developer as part of that. So the use is that final into the reporting platform, and where we start sending off the appropriate data and visualizations and reports that help with decision making. So that's the using part, and I do see value there. So I'm certainly in agreement that that's the area that we want to get the data to. All right. So let's keep on going, Paul.
Okay, so let's revert back to the process of the data trust transformation. So typically, as we've seen with the Panda, we start off with an area where, or in a situation where our data could be dirty. It's been scraped off a website. It's been given to us in some format that we can't quite use yet. So typically, what we're looking at, we don't always know what it means. There's no metadata with it. You've got column headers that are values and not variable names. You've got multiple variables stored in one column. And I'm typically thinking of the data set we've been looking at is a weather data set. But you can think of any sort of chart or table that you see in news reports, for example, that they have to pack a lot of information into a very compact space. And to come back to what JG said, sometimes we criticize the data, but it's not about it necessarily being wrong or bad. It was just produced in a certain way to accomplish a task and a purpose.
Yeah.
That in itself was probably a data product that we now want to use, take up, and include in our process.
Yeah.
To unpack it again. So
I think that's very important, Paul, that people are publishing, and I see that so often, people publish almost a data set onto a website that has gone for storage optimization and width and size optimization, so that it's easy to understand what it is that's being analyzed. And so this is going to live with us. I don't think we'll ever get away from this type of optimization that people are using to present data.
Yeah. And maybe referring to the weather is, again, just look at your weather app.
Yeah.
You know, the next 5 days in there, there's a little sun, and there's also, what's rain? The word I'm looking for, precipitation, is that it?
Precipitation.
There we go, the percentage of that and so on. So very compact here, there's a lot of information in there, but can you really use it without deconstructing it and reassembling it? That's the point. So what we want to do is go from messy to tidy. Tidy is it's essentially the first step is getting the data in whatever format, and now we want to make it tidy. And that essentially means let's just put some structure on it, make some sense out of it, get anything into a proper table and row format. Each variable forms a column, each observation forms a row. It's nice and neat. And each observational unit forms a table. So it's just getting a mess of data into its separate parts. There's no data quality applied here at this point yet. This process is typically called melting, and I think Howard will have a bit more to say later. Okay, so in a traditional or even modern, like in a BI or a data warehouse situation, what you're now doing is you're taking your tidy data, but you are reformatting it into a typical star design. So you've got your fact tables and dimensions, and you want to make it as narrow as possible. In other words, your facts needs to just contain the key events and the foreign keys to the dimensions. Dimensions are typically your reference or your master data. It's the things that hang off of that event. And you want to separate them and make them nice and clean, get your grains right. But inevitably, what you'll get here is more than one star schema representing perhaps different fact tables and scenarios. So we're good at this point in time to a degree because this is how it's been doing. There's a lot of data warehouses in the world that looks like this. BI tools can by and large deal with it, but there's a few issues that you might have picked up along the way. And those issues are when you've designed your star schemas, it's often to the point where you design your solution for specific business requirements. Additional business requirements come later, and now you have to either create new sets or you have to change your grains might not be at the right level. And the unified star schema, what we talked about earlier, is a really great way of sort of getting around this whole loop of business requirements that dictates what the solution looks like. So from a unified star schema perspective, what you're looking at is you basically have a big bridge table in the beginning, or sort of in the middle, and your bridge table connects all the other tables. So in other words, all the tables connect to the bridge, and when you link two tables together, it also always goes through the bridge. And that's the real beauty. Your USS bridge is basically a union of keys, and you're avoiding typical issues that you find in a BI solution. So at this point, if you use good BI tools like Power BI, Tableau, Click, whatever you use, you're in a fairly good state because it knows how to, if you design it right, you can do a lot of visualizations based on data like this. But what we are trying to get to is, if we want to go this step further, and a typical statistician, data scientist, somebody that needs a wider data set for the analytical purposes, you can't stop here. It's going to be useless. You're just looking at a table with keys, and it's going to be quite difficult to actually make sense of it. So the last step in the process is to flatten it out into a wide and tidy data set. So what you have now is you basically flatten out the whole structure. Each data variable is now in a separate column. It does obviously mean that your column widths have increased, so you're going wide as opposed to narrow, of course. But you've dealt with all the pivots. Nothing is pivoted. It could be crude, but it's really flat, and you're dealing with all the permutations of the data that you need. All right, and so this is easier said than done, because along the way there's certain techniques and traps that you need to get around. But in principle, this is the data trust transformation process, by going from something messy to something wide and tidy. And as you can see, so on the right-hand side, this is where self-service and visualization lives. If you do not have a need for R or Python, by the way, put in the chat if you know where the name Python comes from, and you can't Google it. You must just know it offhand. You'll get eyes. Paul Bolton will send you something. I don't know what. I'm putting him on the spot here. All right. So self-service and visualization is basically living in this space here. If you've got a good tool, you'll be able to deal comfortably with that. But if you need to produce analytics where you need to, just sort of work and process it some more, you need to go here. All right. So the data is messy or tidy depending on the rows, columns, and tables, how they are matched up with observations, variables, and types. So it's just about the neatness of it. And in a long vertical format, every row represents an observation belonging to a particular category referred to as narrow. But in a wide format, categorical data is always grouped, and you can think of it as a summary of long data. That's something.
So JG, Paul, maybe I know JG's got his hand up. What I wanted to say is, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this, everyone's gone through this, is so many other times we get tidy data sets. We're lucky if we get tidy. We may have to start in messy. We go to tidy, and then it's not a good idea to start looking at DQ between messy and tidy. You first of all got to get all the metadata right. You've got to get it into a good structure. And then you'll look at the domains per column. And then you'll start finding, by doing a DQ profile on the tidy data set, you can now easily pick up the duplications or challenges with names, uppercase, lowercase, with space, without space. All of those type of things start to happen between the tidy and narrow. Now, all of this is it's of value to the data set. So when we use right at the end there, when we say it's wide and tidy, now it's actually got all of the data quality issues that have been sorted out. It's in a tidy format. It's in that whole, it's all been, all the character values are now in the columns. It's not like your typical fact table sitting in a narrow data set. But you can now, because we can generate that with a view and not having to create extra storage, we can almost export it from the USS. We now have a programmatic transformation, and that's where flattening and denormalization is okay, because we know that it's controlled programmatically and it's not an individual doing that control. JG, I see your hand go up. Has the question been answered?
It was Howard. What I thought was interesting is that post USS it goes wide and tidy. My question was, would you only need USS if you were going wide? But it was answered. My question is actually, you start tidy and then you loop back post DQ. And so thank you. That the point that you've just raised is actually the last piece of tidy comes with tidy and DQ. And ability to scale. So thank you. That wasn't clear to me originally. So that's good. Thank you.
So JG, also to explain, for example, in Excel, where you can do goal seeking in Excel, and you can basically, so you've got your measures there, and now what you're trying to say is what set of columns drive the value to a certain point, right? So if I want my value or my temperature to be really low, then what's going to drive it? So it would be things like height, elevation, or things like that, the mountains or the countries, the latitude and longitude. And you need more descriptive terms within those columns than just a surrogate key. So you now got to go flat, and you've got to create a wide data set to look at the relationships between the columns to achieve a certain outcome.
With you. Thanks, Howard. That makes huge sense now. Thank you.
Bryn?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the overlap, if you like, between these terms tidy and data quality. And I think there is a bit of overlap, really, because when you say if tidy, each variable forms a column, I mean, what we're talking about there, if I understand it correctly, is you're effectively parsing.
It's actually, Bryn, if I can, I found a really neat explanation. It's almost going from a zero normal form to first normal form, where you've actually got the right metadata, the right column names, and the right understanding. So, for example, sometimes your columns could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, when you look at it, right, shucks, that's actually a month, and it's over the years and it's a month thing. Now I would have to get the right variable in the form that explains the month or whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we are talking about parsing as well, what we found is that in order to parse, you need to obviously identify a pattern in a string, for example.
Yeah.
But to do that, or then to separate them out via parsing, you need to do some standardization, which in effect is data quality.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes back on itself. So
Yeah.
along the way, we probably need to be a little bit more clear about what is tidy and what is data quality, because they're big terms in their own right.
Okay.
And there's a lot of subjectivity as well, obviously involved, particularly when it comes to quality component.
So what I have done, and the reason I suggest that in terms of, and I see you saying there, you're questioning that last bullet point saying that there's no DQ yet. So what I've allocated, it's almost a case of it's normalization, and that's reducing redundant data. And yes, that helps DQ, but it's not the process of doing DQ. And the other aspect on that is adding metadata to add understanding. Now, whether from a strict data quality point of view, all I'm saying is I'm not applying almost the accuracy, the referential integrity at that point in time. I'm not building out domain values, domain sets, and consistencies. I'm not actually creating consistencies. I'm almost just labeling the columns and the variables. So I'm adding metadata at that point.
Yeah, great, got it. It would be great to, at some point maybe just articulate exactly what we mean by tidy.
Yeah.
And what we mean by data quality.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I agree with you.
Yeah, good idea. And maybe just before I go on, just to clarify again, so why we are saying that self-service and visualization lives here, you don't necessarily need to go here.
Yeah.
Unless there's a good reason for you to do so. BI tools work very comfortably with this format here, and we are on a couple of projects right now, which just makes it so much easier to deal with data and create visuals, just using the USS structure. So going wide and tidy has got a very specific purpose, and that's more for statistical or data science or.
Yeah, look, it's choosing the algorithm. That's the important thing. And I just know I've got a fact table in one area that's it's got almost 250 columns, and most of those point off to dimensions, and then those dimensions each one could have 3 or 4 attributes. At the point in time of going into a machine learning or a modeling, you don't actually know those interactions. So now you've got to go from 250 multiplied by 4, you're looking at 1,000 columns. That's not, I mean, it can be done. I'm not disagreeing, but it's not, it's not easy.
Yeah.
At scale. And whereas we can automate that because we've got the metadata sitting with us on the USS, and we can now almost write code to take every single dimension from every single attribute from all dimensions, all the facts, and then almost remove the surrogate keys and get rid of them.
Cool. Any other questions or comments at this point? Salad. All right. So this is an interesting one to just sort of see who's involved in which area of the DMBOK almost is involved in what way in this process. So when you're starting to melt, in other words, your target is to go tidy. The data governance angle would be, well, why do we need this data in the first place? What's the purpose of it? Are we sure about it? And the data modeler is going to help with what's the best way to structure and answer the business questions. So you might have at this point, depending on what your use case is, some more formal modeling happening. And from a metadata perspective is, what does the raw data mean? When you then go from tidy into star schema, your dimensional modeling kicks in. So So it's about what observations and variables and values are required. This is where your master data management, or at least usage, definitely usage and maybe an influence on the management itself, comes in. What's the authoritative status of stored data? What are the data quality rules we need to apply, etc. And then just data quality itself in support of dimensions is the questions will be, well, are the observations of the business meter mapped to the required variables and values? When we go into star schema, USS, the data modeling needs to now ask, well, can we support decision making based on what we have? Data quality really kicks in now because we need to make sure that our data is reliable. And from a data integration perspective, what transformations are required? So you could argue that at this point, data integration has already been touched on, but to get it into the USS can be quite hairy, as I think how it is sort of run into as well, and I'm getting into it as well, and it can be difficult. All right, and so when we go to flatten, two aspects, the tidy then speaks to the business intelligence, and the wide goes then more into the advanced analytics, and both of them have an influence on the data lifecycle. So it's interesting just to look at this process through the eyes of some of the role players in the typical data management sphere. All right. So just maybe in summary, Howard, I think we've probably covered some of these
what I sort of just wanted to say here was that what has been nice and useful for me is to help people categorize the type of mess that they're facing. So, for example, if I have column headers as values, and we'll show you some examples, then what sort of transformation do I need to do? And what is the result that I'm looking for? And then in other cases is why is this in such a state? And so this is what I was trying to explain. If you look at Messy 2, its transformation from 0 normal form to first normal form. Messy 3 is applying an unpivot and a pivot. The transformation on Messy 4 is separate observation units into multiple tables. Now we're going from first to second normal form. And then we've got the combining multiple tables together. So these are the challenges that you're going to face all the time. We've provided some Power BI samples on how you would do it and how you would get out of the mess, that level of mess. And so that's what this is all about. There's a way of cleaning up the mess.
Yeah, and we've got some examples. We're closer to 5 o'clock, but
yeah, so this is a great example here. Paul, do you want to talk about it or?
I think you can go ahead.
Okay, so what's interesting in here, and this is a perfect data set that you'll see on the website or a page or a PDF, and you can now see that there's something, just by looking at it, you can see that there's some logic that's been applied. So it's basically saying that for religion, this is the income. They're talking about an income, to say this is the breakdown of income, and people earning less than $10,000. Okay, and then earning between 10 and 20, 20 and 30, 30 and 40. So can you see there that these column headers are values that that will be used in the pivoting and getting it tidy? So these are the type of things where a human being can look at it and say, all right, I understand what that means. I've got to break it down into different units. And if you're going to the next one, Paul. So here's another one where we got multiple variables are stored in one column. Okay, so we can see here that this is a male. The M stands for male and female. And then there's an age range between 0 and 14, 15 and 24, and the female. And then we've also got a MU age range, and there was actually some data in this complete data set where they didn't know what the age range was. but this is also important. So now what you've got to do is you've got to break and you've got to pivot, unpivot the columns, and then you've got to separate the M from the 0 and 14, and then you've got to separate that you've got 2 digits start and end, and so you've got to break all the string processing that Bryn was talking about, and getting the format right, and the consistency. Okay, so that's what we do with Messy 2. This is Messy 3, where we melt this thing, and there's all sorts of sample packages with both an R and Panda within Python that actually helps you go melt it and tidy and wide the data set. You actually call these functions, and they then break it up into something that we can see over here. Okay, so can you see now how I take all the dates and I actually create a date column from day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, depending on the year and the month, and this actually had 30 columns. And so when we melted that thing, this data set got really big. Okay, so Messy 4 is now what we're doing is we've got multiple observations, and we're starting to separate these into different tables. So this is a song data set, which Paul was referring to, reference and master data. This is our master data set, and then we've got a ranking time data set, which is where our facts actually are. So now it's getting those into the right tables. Okay, and then Messy 5 is just we may have for every single year from the website we get published 2017, we get a data set 2018, 2019, and then we're left with 5 or 6 data sets, and then the format changes, and so we got to get to this consistent format. Okay, so then the next one we were just talking about is really just understanding and adhering to the type of terminology that statisticians use, so that we can explain when we create that Y data set, and you can see the observations are for every single variable, every single column, which is a variable. We now have a data point for all those values and for the one value and the multiple variables. Okay, so this was quite a helpful thing on creating a cookbook, explaining to people where we get the variables, what are the units, what are the choices that you've made to do that transformation. And this is as important, and I suppose that's the nice thing with self-service, is that you can actually see what transformations were done. Whereas sometimes what we do is we get the data set off the website and then we give a clean data set and we don't understand what transformations happened in the process.
Yeah, and I think that's basically it from a presentation point of view. So, any questions? More comments?
I have a question.
Jimmy, your question on the Divas.
No, well, first my question is on the pandas. Why pandas? Because they're very cute.
What is your question the panda would like to answer?
Should we go back to the panda? Can you get back to that?
Let me go there. Yes, Debbie?
I mean, my question is, who chose the panda? And why a panda?
Esty, would you like to answer that?
Esty's gone.
Oh,
I can read. It was in discussion between Esty and I. Debbie, the class in Python, there's an analytical set of a library that helps you interrogate the data, and that library is called Panda.
Yeah, pandas.
So it helps you work with the data and helps you do these type of things that we're doing. So this is sort of what Panda is doing as well, but for Python.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cute.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I know what Panda 6 feels like.
So did anybody in the chat put the answer to why is it called Python?
Yeah, they had 3 people. I think Jacques pointed out Monty Python, Veronica confirmed Monty Python.
Veronica, and Jock. I think Jock was first, so he needs to get a prize.
Yeah.
Veronica, you can't answer these questions. And Jeffrey as well. It's Monty Python.
Yeah, Jeffrey. All righty. Paul, Mr. Paul Bolton, it's over to you.
Well,
Cool.
sorry.
Firstly, to get the prize, I need to understand how you connect Monty Python to Python in data.
So
Yeah, so you must motivate your answer and come up with a good philosophical.
Yes, there we go.
I like it.
So Paul, I don't know if you can refresh your slide deck, but you're missing a slide, which is and Debbie I just wanted to share that with the people. The DAMA user group meeting, you may see that there's a announcement that's just been made.
Perfect.
Oh, Debbie's on a different deck. Anyway, now go ahead.
Sorry, I'm usually on a different deck to the rest of the world. But yes, so for our DAMA user group meeting this month, we are celebrating Women's Day in South Africa, Women's Month. So we will be hosting a Data Divas panel discussion with all the women of data, the Shiros, and just to discuss their experiences with data and hopefully inspire the future generation of data divas. So we'd love for you guys to join and get to know our DAMA SA data divas.
And I think the Debbie DJ will be playing songs from the Divas, right?
Of course, you have to have the divas involved.
So who will be on the panel? Do we know that? Can we disclose that yet?
I know that Esty will be on the panel. We will also have Di Joseph and Veronica Diesel will be one of them as well.
And there's another lady from there's a possible lady from Holland and then a lady from South America that we interact with. So she'll also be talking.
Yes, very excited. We also have she hosts her own data talk show as well. Her name is Nukumisa Klapo. So she will be joining as well. I think she is around BI. So yeah, very excited to have all these different range of ladies talking data with us.
Excellent.
Well, we can add one more character to that panel, but then Esty will have to say it's okay to call the panda she. We can... Anyway, thanks, Debbie.
Thank you guys so much.
Cool.
Thank you for a lovely discussion.
Mr. Bolton.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. And thanks to everybody for your time today. It was fantastic once again. And if I can ask, Howard, just next week, where are we now? The 12th,
Yeah.
we carry on with the subject?
Yeah, next week's on the same. It's analyzing data, but now it's for the data management professionals. So there'll be more technical. It's more around the data engineer area in terms of building those data products.
Great stuff. Looking forward to that. And yes, anybody interested in re-listening, the recording will be made available, Debbie, from say Monday next week. Just drop us a note on LinkedIn and Debbie will be sure to send it out to you. And anybody that missed it, if you know anybody that'd be interested to listen, also just pass on the details. Thanks everybody. Until next week, stay safe and behave. Cheers.
Parental guidance. That should be coming from Paul Gambit.
Yeah, I was actually looking at him when I